Um, Good afternoon for the Europoors. Good morning for anyone else, and good night for whoever is still asleep. We are currently on yet another space. This space will be centered mostly on the yapping from the Ukrainian side when it comes to ammo, air defenses, and generally almost everything. But we will start concentrating into basically the major hurdles that technically are being cleared for a mass mobilization in Ukraine. But at the same time, given recent data that we're finally getting through, actually they were there since the beginning. It's just that we never tried to make sense of what, how, when, who, when it came to mobilization. You remember that for a long while, mobilization was actually a meme on the Ukrainian side. We had some numbers, like one guy killed end of 2022, which was found with his mobilization notice on his pocket. Guys was from Zhytomyr. I always use that as a baseline, but now we are seeing a lot more things. So basically, the guy had a mobilization notice number 300,000 plus something. That was in December 2022, and we all surmised, or at least I surmised. Let's not put the whole circle into that. I surmised that 300,000 plus about 230,000 to start with. Ukraine was about 500,000 troops by the end of 2022, and that was, of course, visible because they were just running all over the Russian mobilization, Russian forces by more or less November 2022. Then the full brunt of the Russian mobilization came by, and things got stuck for Ukraine. And then the Russians restart their, I'd say, shaping and creeping offensive style, which we're seeing right now, with, of course, the huge parenthesis of the counter that starts roughly end of May until more or less the 10th of October, which is now an official date of the Russians assuming fully a tactical and strategic initiative in Ukraine. So, first of all, that's the good. The good is that there is real progress. We are now in average about 16 to 20 square kilometers per 3 days. It comes with a lot of losses, so that's I've never shied about. There are losses. It's very complicated also to justify them right now, in the sense that even if there's an advance, losses are rather high. But the real logic of this is what we're seeing on the back. Ukrainians are complaining a lot about the MPKs, and we are seeing from the Russians every single other day one air defense loss, but not a small one. We're not speaking about the small Strela. We're not speaking about some ZU-23 on a truck. No, we are speaking S-300 tells. Like today, two tells were gone. One ground control station was gone. Yesterday, it was a Malakit P-18 plus the power station and some idiots next to it. Before that, I think was another P-18 taken out by first a Lancet and then a strike type, either X 85 is ZD85 or KH35U, whatever. So it's ongoing. And of course, all these losses are delayed, so we know exactly what is being lost only a couple of days after. The Odessa strike, for instance, that was shown today, probably is at least 10, 12 days old. And the results of those strikes are that Odessa has been hammered the last few days. On the other side, the show today was absolutely amazing because the distance between the front line and the area where the Orlan, Zala, whatever the drone was over 70 kilometers. And 70 kilometers, guys, to fly unimpeded, it's I think it's a new record right now in this war. There is another thing that happened is someone picked up a Leleka 100 in Matev Kurgan, but I'm pretty sure that Leleka was just gliding out of range. So in that area, we are into probably the deepest penetration by any kind of drone. Of course, most of it is water, so I'm not going to start being overjoyed, but still, they can join the other coast. We had already seen Zalas and Orlans early in the war in 2022, flying over Odessa while Odessa was getting bombed. But generally, as I said, this is a completely different war for Russia in the air. It's pretty funny because at the same time, we have this thing that actually Abu Julianis or Julian Rupke said that the more the Russians go for the ground war, kind of attrition war, when they're using their brunt to crack the Ukrainian lines, the more in the air the Russians are going more and more in the future. I made a post, ironical post about that Russia, at least partially on its air war and also artillery war, is being dragged into the 21st century, kicking and screaming. And that's it. That's right now. There is a total domination when it comes to strategic assets and front assets on the Russian side. Even the few AD assets that are being lost by Russia or being hit by Ukraine are mostly frontline assets, tactical ones. That's nothing to do. I mean, we saw S-300V getting squashed, and Ukraine had literally one battery of those, and we've seen at least 4 of them destroyed so far. So the whole battery is going down. There is also a way too specific hunt behind P-18s and early warning radars. So far, we are at roughly 12 this year, which is 4 per month, more or less. If it keeps going like this, the Western allies or whoever has these compatible radars, P-18s or whatever could be used, will have to push them through and give them to Ukraine. Funny enough, for people who maybe remember what was said, is that Ukrainians had this huge, very nice network, full audio, full passive, that put smartphones or whatever around their country over the current front line, but also the border. And in a certain loop within the country itself, so they could listen to whatever was coming. Very funny. Actually, I didn't want to make an analysis of that because it's pretty much very stupid. If you put 8,000 of those and you start this quadrant bracketing, you would maybe cover 2% of Ukraine. Or there is something else, and the whole iPhone, smartphone bullshit is just retardation. And of course, it is. In order to have that kind of network, you would at least need 100 times that, so 800,000 listeners. Given the huge, the extent of the Ukrainian territory, the official one is over 600,000 square kilometers. And you're covering that with 8,000 phones. I mean, we go into this continuous bullshittery that the Americans are feeding their public and the European public to literally hide in the open. Same thing for the logic of we do not agree with Ukraine striking gas and oil infrastructure. But as I said last time, it's not possible for Ukrainians to know where the AD is at the point of attack because of the depth and the intelligence depth that you need to actually bypass these defenses. And it's not that the Russians do not start trying to plug the gaps. That is purely, I'm going to repeat, this is just for show that Putin or Austin are trying to pretend that somehow it's bad for the Ukrainians to hit the refineries. The problem is something else, is that while the Ukrainians are striking these refineries, Russians interpret this as an escalation. And well, we have what I had today, which is a full strike on actual TPP for a lot of the Ukrainians, a lot of the Zdradais, a lot of the Skitos on the Z side. Yes, guys, it's possible. They can do it. It's not an issue. It was never an issue. I do not feel vindicated by that, by the way, because my vindication would be to fucking hit Kamyanske and to fucking hit Kaniv. You hit Kaniv, you hit Kamyanske, you completely destroy the ecosystem within the Dnieper basin. You overload the dam in Zaporozhye and you basically kill the whole Dnieper basin Ukrainian side. If that happens, then I will be vindicated and then I could start bragging. But right now, we don't have that. Right now, what we had a warning shot with huge consequences. We had the first follow-up shot with huge consequences. Now we have a third follow-up shot because the second was hitting gas infrastructure, which apparently was also hit again today. So this is the good. The good is that the Russians right now are understanding that all what's going on, all this attrition, the deterioration of the Ukrainian infrastructure, be that military or civilian or dual, because right now makes no sense. As I said, the Ukrainian state right now puts every single penny it gets from its nation, its taxpayers, into the war machine legally. And I know it's going to be very stupid to say legally. That means that every single taxpayer is currently feeding the war machine. This is also what happens in normal times. You pay your taxes and the state spends them accordingly. So this is for military budget, this is for social security and so on. But right now, every single penny goes to the military, which means that you can always loophole yourself into saying that pretty much every taxpayer is a military supporting agent or stuff like that. Although we all know Russians do not need this. But what's going on right now is that the Ukrainians are basically trying to fill a hole in the water. People who know the expression from the French know that you cannot make a hole in the water because the water is going to fill it up right away. This is exactly what's going on with the Ukrainians right now. And the good part of all this is that while the Russians are upping the pressure, the Ukrainians' only response right now has been, unfortunately for a lot of us, using the FPV, using drones, using non-contact to blunt assaults. So basically, they're still ongoing, mainly at the tactical level, mainly at the frontline level. There are some bombings, up to now 12 ASM 250 Hammer were used partly to bomb the now infamous hangar where the Russian tankers and Russian engineers were preparing these tortoise tanks. And then also Krasnogorivka and Shipilivka are being hit, mostly because the Ukrainians are still thinking in 2022. The nature of these ASM strikes is the same as they did with the HIMARS strikes in 2022. They are completely forgetting what the counterpart is right now. The counterpart is that, okay, you're going to hit these guys and maybe you're going to destroy, a couple of trucks 20, 30, 50 guys. It's par for course now. We are into this kind of war. On the other side, you got the Russians. I actually posted a excerpt today of a thread that appeared on Twitter. At the same time, when you just like dropped 8 to 12 ASM 250s, of which you technically have 50 per month, once again, theoretically, because we don't exactly know how many the French delivered. The Russians, meanwhile, just dropped, I don't know, 80, 100. The difference in scale, guys, is so huge that now it makes no sense to try and deal with this kind of counter attacks or counter value. The reality of this war is that Ukrainians indeed initially did it well and should be ongoing to do this, which is using these long range drones to start hitting Russian infrastructure, mostly benefiting the Russian budget, and then maybe starting to try and blow up stuff that would slow down Russian production, Russian maintenance, and Russian repair. This is not what's happening. I mean, right now, the only things that were attacked that regard Russian production were 3 failed attacks. And honestly, it's very retarded. I honestly think that the fact that Ukrainians are going for quote unquote Putin's wallet instead of going for actually what is being built. And lately, the guy Andrei BVBT showed a excerpt of a Russian show, which is this military acceptance. It's a bit silly, but basically they were showing around in UVZ, and you could see that probably around end of March, beginning of April in Ural Vagonzavod, the T-72B number 500 was being refurbished to B3 over 22 or B over 22, whatever they want to call it, standard. This means that the order, which started end of September, in 6 months, has gone to 500. And Andre was like, yeah, completely rejecting it, say that you see there is a problem, they are not refurbishing enough, and the substance is going down, and therefore the T90M production is going to take over. This is something that at some point was bound to happen, mostly because refurbishment, I said at some point, becomes a bit of a sunk cost fallacy, because you will start to pull all these T-72Bs, whatever the state is. You know that usually for refurbishment you have A state categorization. So let's categorize it in A state, B state, C state, D state, and E state. So basically A, easiest to refurbish, and E being the worst. Right now, looking at more or less what's going on, let's say that the Russians have mostly run out of A's and are going through the B level, and therefore you're going to start going C, D, and E. The moment you are on D and E, of course, it's a problem because you are, going through the tanks. But at the same time, even if you're not going through these tanks, even if the mass of your refurbishment pool is mostly C, D, and E's or F's, I think it's a more compelling naming. It means that you're going to still start losing time refurbishing them. You're going to start spending maybe 2 months just to regenerate the hull, regenerate the turret, regenerate your bow, and so on. While producing new tanks would take you more or less 3 weeks from the get-go to the pushing out of the production lane. This is one of the things I insist in 2022. For as long as refurbishment is good enough, both in tempo and both in cost, time and money, it makes no sense to start producing. That's why for a long while it was considered to restart the T-80 production, and it was even announced that T-80 was going to be reproduced. For me, it's a 50-50 news, but that's what's going to happen with a lot of these tanks. And unfortunately, this war, I said that in the group, doesn't need T-14s without a solution regarding both the safety of the crew, but also the survivability of the tank. Because right now, the most survival method is literally turning the tanks, quote unquote, into non-tanks. You saw the armored barn around Krasnogorivka. If this is the future, and the Chinese actually have such a project, but it's still a top-heavy, I'd say, multi-spectral project, but I have also the idea that it's going to start costing a lot. Okay, the grates, the slates, the cope cage, whatever you want, it's one thing. Maybe that's going to add 20% on the tank, but then you're going to have the APS, which was present on the Chinese CAD project. And that thing right now could also be integrated on the Russian tanks. It would certainly help with the FPVs, given the actual very slow speed they have. So basically, the interdiction or interception would work perfectly well, especially the large shotgun type interceptors. It would be less nice for the accompanying troops, but right now, as you see, most of the mechanized assaults are not with the troops staying next to the tank. But generally, what I'm saying is that for the Russians and for the Ukrainians right now, it seems that strategically both sides are working completely parallel phenomena. It would have been easier for the Ukrainians to cause that damage and start having the Russians worry about the economy. But at the same time, as I said, the problem is that the Russians have quote unquote friends and also sources. Belarus was one for gasoline and diesel. Now we're speaking about Kazakhstan, although the reality, as I said, would be easier for the Russians to just drop more oil in China as an offset method. The Chinese refine it, and of course they keep the oil as a offset term, and everybody wins in a sense, because finally for the Russians the oil output as it stands is not that important. They already cut that production and sending to China to be refined, and meanwhile part of it stays in China, could be a nice arrangement. I'm saying China, could be anyone else. This is not something specifically the Chinese, but the Chinese are the main target here, because both ones they have overcapacity, and the most important part, beyond the overcapacity, it allows the Chinese to actually be enshrined as the main partner. Although India is still buying Russian oil, problem with the Indians is that apparently they're, sorry to say guys for those who listen to me, are bitches, and they pretend to play the double game, calling themselves BRICS, but at the same time, when the push comes to shove, they are going to fold under American pressure. What can we say? Sometimes it is what it is. However, the other very good news is that the advance on the ground, although it's been extremely costly, doesn't seem to be recoverable by Ukraine right now. We haven't seen a counterattack. We haven't seen any thing retaken. The Krasnogorivka pullback was, in my opinion, logic, because there is no way to support that group without sending a fuck ton of unarmored vehicles with troops, and also having complete control over the city center by distance, so basically contactless, the same way the Ukrainians are doing with their FPVs. Russians should also be able to do with their FPVs. But the moment that you don't have this buffer at the city center, it doesn't matter. Ukrainians are going to start infiltrating, and you are always going to get less people there. Another problem is, as I said, for Ukrainians right now, is that while they complain a lot about ammunition and everything generally, the culminating point has been the lack of manpower. And on this, Teamwork Criminals White Horse, Trapped Iron had made it a thread. We discussed it. It started with a very little snippet from the Nicolas Vauvier, Chairman Kim, as we mock him. And then we just started to scratch and see that a lot of the things that we're seeing, so basically that in Ukraine, for most of the oblasts, we're looking at least 2.8 to 3% of the general population as mobilized. This was, I'm going to be honest, a bit of a surprise because, my idea was, I'm going to repeat myself, about 300, 350 by 2022, another 200 in more or less, give or take, in 2023, and then that's it. Basically, maximum 600,000 mobilized by both years, plus the 200 something they had as a standing army. Add to this a myriad of volunteers who are not military but still, participating in logistical trains, all that shit, and you are looking at 700,000, 800,000 of a army that is in any capacity able to fight. Well, first of all, apparently I was wrong. Ukrainians have gone way beyond that. Now, to my defense, there is a small, how can I say this? A small excerpt in an article that we've read, I think it was also provided by Trapped Iron, where someone complained that we are saying that we have 800,000 people under the flag. 300,000 are fighting, where the other 500,000. Of course, it's not indicating that 500,000 are casualties, although I'll get to that later. But I had exactly the same logic, and I discussed this with Trapped Iron. I said, listen, there is a problem here. When it comes to whatever was levied, whatever was enlisted or conscripted, doesn't matter. The bigger problem is that it makes no sense when you compare to the losses. And of course, Trapped gave me a very good answer by saying that it's more complicated in smaller units to hide shit because it's beyond the direct control of the authorities. And even with all the suppression, we are at about 47,000 dead that we know of on the Ukrainian side. Plus, there are the missing in action, which every time this thing happens, they're never declared dead by the Ukrainian authorities. So we have this missing in action count that goes up. Initially, it was 7,000, then it was 15,000, it was 23,000, it was 29,000. Now we should be around 32 to 33,000. And every time the military age missing in action, or whatever you want to call it, just grows. And then slowly, they say, oh, we find 500 dead, 500 here, 500 there. And at the same time, when you go to the exchange of the bodies, speaking about the bodies, those exchanges per month are not that high to justify, like, okay, here are the dead. They are higher on the Ukrainian side. The exchanges every time are superior on the Ukrainian side. You can verify this. This is not some kind of cope. You can check, like, Ukraine and Russia swap bodies. The latest that I know of was in mid-March, and it was 100 Ukrainians for 69 Russians. But generally, the deceased swapped also cannot justify the absence of data on who is dead, who's alive, where are these 500,000. So basically, let's go back to the point. When it comes to mobilization, I wasn't expecting the Ukrainians to mobilize that much. 3% of, if we take this as a fucking rule, 3% of general population, depending on where you put Ukrainian population. Let's say pre-war, that means a fuck ton of people. You are looking at a million point one, million point two even, almost. If you are looking at the immediate post-war population, so when they dropped at like 26 to 31, then you see yourself, it should be between 780 and 900 something levied. And of course, in 25 months, it starts to more or less make sense, because it would be a levy of 20,000 per month, which, in my opinion, sorry, so what I'm saying, 30,000 per month, completely out of the 20,000 was my logic, but 30,000 per month. So you are into this narrative now, when indeed, like, let's say you grab 30,000 per month, you put it at the front line, but where are they? And also, one of the biggest situation that we have is also nothing is following, because if these people were in the army and the military, whatever you want to call it, but you would have the equipment for them. And I'm not speaking about glorified SUVs with some iron plates like the Rochelle's, the Bats, or now the Ingwan, or whatever bullshit they invented. We're speaking about APCs, about guns, about tanks, about IVs. It's just not there. And then, as I said, when you start considering all of it, you arrive at a very small force that is fighting, and the rest of it, where the fuck are they? And of course, it could be replacement, because every day you're gonna lose people, you have to replace them. But then it doesn't look like a working strategy for Ukraine, whereas that it could be a working strategy for Russia, given they have the initiative. And then you have the new mobilization law that comes in, and they say 500,000. And you're like, 500,000 how? Who, where, which, with what? Initially, I thought that 500,000 was logical, because there was this provision within the project law that would start discharging people. And of course, you can start discharging within 2 years. Who knows? Maybe 150,000, 200,000 people are gone. So you need to replace them, and then replace the losses on top of these discharges. And 500,000 for 2 years seemed okay, because that was the plan. 500,000, 450, 500,000 for 18 months. But let's say 2 years to be in tempo, and it would be fine. Yet nothing makes sense, because like the proven losses, and I had a discussion right now with Trapped, and I did 55. Proven losses, irrecoverables, should be around 200,000, even a bit more. Total losses, but around 400,000. That's huge, by the way. Those who are not in real capability to fight, because we're having these articles when guys said, like, okay, you have to have a kind of mental load on you and be prepared and so on. And most of the remaining recruits are not able to do that. So I can completely believe that half of the units are unusable. And there comes the FPV non-contact logic, where of course this allows for a lot of damage to be done without having to use your infantry. But at the same time, you have to park this infantry, or these people that need to help you, the logisticians, the controllers, of course, some of the fighting units that are going to go in R&R. And these guys get bombed as well. So with the fact that the Russians now have this tool, these gliding bombs, plus other stuff, because there is not only that, it makes it extremely impossible to do what I think happened during the first year of the war, which was a lot of mobilization and losses that were hard on the Ukrainians, but were completely absorbed by the new mobilization, and most importantly, by the fact that Russians were not advancing anymore past mid-March, except, of course, for the Luganda area. So this is where the attrition logic that somehow Rand wanted to defend. I don't know if it was Rand. No, it was Rusi. Rand was different. Rand wanted a shorter war. Sorry. So Rusi wanted to defend that there is this attrition logic and you can do it to Russia. And this attrition logic, by the way, is completely obvious today because they are all trying to put forward how many losses Russians have. While remember that during the counter, they would have the same kind of losses, but they would glorify their advances by inches. So apparently, this is one thing I said in the group, said that apparently both sides are believing their own fairy tales. On the Ukrainian side, that the attrition is going to work. But as I said, the problem with attrition is that there is always a pendant. So you're going to swing the ball, and the ball is going to come back at you. If you want to gain back your ground, you're going to have to go on the offensive. And trust me, guys, the FPV issues, they're going to be just the same, but for Ukrainians. Not going to speak about UMPKs, not going to speak about Lancets, not going to speak about helicopters or whatever. I'm just going to tell you that on the FPV alone, and given how badly equipped are the Ukrainians right now, is going to be a fucking fiesta. And actually, you guys had that. We had that with Bakhmut, and Bakhmut was a way better bet for the Ukrainians generally. But now there's where their biggest risk is unfolding. But let's go back to now a more detailed point of view. Three main things. First of all, the Russian advance is smart, not always very subtle, but actually right now smart. The area around Avdiivka is being done more or less as we predicted. So basically, they are trying to push and focus all the retreat from the Ukrainian side around the Karlivka Reservoir. Once the Karlivka Reservoir is completely pushed out, that's going to be the contact line for a while between the Russians and the Ukrainians. So the Ukrainians do not have anything on the low ground and are blocked physically by the ponds there. The Russians are already doing it, but going to push from Umansk and go back to Semenivka. Problem with Semenivka / Semenovka, call it as you wish, is that apparently Russians are also taking it as we speak. So that first line of defense took some time. It's true that we're about 4 weeks post the declared goal, and about 6 weeks after the fall of Avdiivka officially. And it's true that line took a hell of a beating, but held the Russians at some point. Now, with the loss of Peromaisk, Bogdanovka is going to be confirmed as well. Novomikhailivka is also going to fall. The problem is that Peromaisk falling, Nitalov is not too far. The penetration up north under Umansk to cut Semenovka on the back causes another problem, as I said, because then you are on the high ground, start to go on the high ground. So generally, the plan to clear up the backyard or the front yard of the Donetsk city is going okayish. It's not too bad. I said the biggest problem are the type of losses we're seeing. They're awful in the sense that they are very visible, and Ukrainians make no fucking secret about what they want to do with them. They are going to film, then you're going to see that multiple angles of the same attack and so on and so on. While on the other side, the Russians drop that bomb and you say, oh, did they hit something? And then you learn a couple of weeks after that the place where they hit with their bomb generally flattened 3 to 4 apartments, and you found 30 guys under that. That's also one thing with the UMPKs that given the number they're dropping on the Ukrainians right now, it doesn't even need to be accurate more than 10% of the time. Because that shit, when it hits, is at least 10 to 20 guys that are out of combat. Not say killed, but out of combat. And then you got the materials, some cars and stuff going up. The UNPKs are indeed changing this war. And I think even the F-16s are not going to be able to challenge that. In the way the UNPKs are being used. Then you got the UNPBs. Then, of course, we got other strike elements. But anyway, this is not very important. The most important part is that right now, the big fight is that very visible FPVs, some Lancet-style suicide drones against UNPKs massively on the back. And how do we know that the UNPKs are working despite the fact that we do not see much of it? Well, it's simply because the Ukrainians, despite everything that they're showing up front, are being pushed back. And of course, it could be the whole cede some territory for time and for enemies' attrition. And I would agree with that 100%. 100%. If the Russians didn't have the same tools in defense, if we hadn't seen the counter last year, given that we saw all that, and given how the counter is going to be done, at least in Avdiivka, everywhere else it's a different matter. But in Avdiivka, they will have to go through flatland, going towards highland, towards Avdiivka. So that ground there is as good as done. I don't think the Ukrainians right now will try anything there. They could try elsewhere. They could try again north of Bakhmut, whatever you want. They could try in Lugansk Oblast. They could try in Kharkov, whatever is remaining of the Kharkov Oblast in Russian hands. But if they counterattack in Avdiivka, and we've seen some happening, like, Mikhailovka, they're trying to push the single tanks. We saw the Abrams, we saw the Leopards, we saw the Bradleys. It's just going to be the same wholesale massacre with the problems that the Ukrainians have a lot less to throw. Therefore, the whole mobilization, therefore, the whole begging, therefore, the whole bullshit. There are other problems, like in Robotyne, we are seeing, again, the same thing. Russians are advancing. To me, the Ukrainians are probably at the cemetery area since at least 3-4 weeks. But now we have the evidence. As I said, there is a BTR that went unmolested to the center, got attacked by FPVs, they got missed by artillery and so on, but there was no human presence then there to greet it. While this was the exact same contrary, when they started the first big pushes, when they entered there, some of the guys were captured by Ukrainians standing right there. Right now, there is nothing of that. Ukrainians do not dare to advance, and we have this huge problem of something is happening to Ukrainian troops. They are dying. We're seeing them dying, but it's not on tape. For instance, today it was announced the guy who died in Odessa because of the strike that was done on the Tornado Battalion. No, it wasn't. It was Tsunami Battalion. Part of the Loot Brigade, or whatever the fuck it's called. The guy wasn't announced until today, but the strike happened at least a month ago. So this is the biggest trouble we have right now, is that on one side, you are having a lot of almost immediate confirmation due to the strikes being televised, to make a reference. And on the other side, you are just having this, except for artillery, of course, like very huge targets, like S-300s, artillery and all this shit. But then you have this feeling that it's not possible with all the Russian losses that these guys are advancing. And you have this, it's not like small advance, it's not like 200-300 meters. In recent days, we've seen them over 2 kilometers up front, over 3 kilometers up front, The latest one was 1.7 kilometers on slant. There are apparently guys that are entered Umansky. We had this push between Netailove and Umansky. Like, all this stuff doesn't happen. I'm going to repeat, nilly-willy. There is a logic behind it on why it happens. I'm not saying the Ukrainians are letting them there, going to kill them or not. This was the sick thought of a pro-Ukrainian guy. Problem is that you're still going back, and you are not going back in ways that you can come and recover the lost ground. Until now, there is no way that you can recover that lost ground without incurring the same losses you're inflicting on the Russians. And the biggest problem, and then I'm going to jump on the Ukrainian side, is that I think Ukrainians know what it would take to go back and grab most of the land they're losing right now. And I think they don't care about taking the ground back right now. I'm not saying in the future, I'm saying right now. I don't see the Ukrainian troops trying to prepare or having the capacity to do it in the areas where they're losing their troops. And this is something that, to me, is extremely weird, rare, problematic. Nobody's trying to do anything to solve the situation on the Ukrainian side. For instance, for UNPKs, they tried something with this Wandering Patriot battery, and of course it was gone. Now they installed shit in Kharkiv trying to stop UNPK strikes. It was also gone. The latest battery slash element of S-300 battery in Chernomorsk area to defend Odessa, gone. It's becoming a lot right now, and I'm not going to say the Russians are going to dominate the skies. No, because at some point the Ukrainians are going to go to what they did early in the war when a lot of their AD was vaporized. They just went on island mode with shitty stuff like books and shit. Right now they have some books, but they're most probably going to have these hawks, some lower level defenses. Maybe the Kurtals are going to make a show. So the problem with the Ukrainians, if they want still to stop the Russians from doing what they should be doing now, which is like almost flying over the targets, releasing whatever they could release in mass, and then going, Ukrainians are just going to take the big L to get the small W. And that's why also they're crying for these strike assets from the US in order to hit the closest Russian bases, because, of course, the Russians are going to sit next door for many reasons. But in this case, they're going to sit next door because it's the easiest way to do it. It's just to fly in, drop bombs, go back. It's economic. Ukrainians do not have any asset to counterattack you. And when they tried so clumsily with assets that are counterable, especially if you send them into a very AD heavy zone like it happens with Morozovsk. But generally, we're going to a point when a lot of gaps are going to happen into the Ukraine AD all over the country. And then it's going to start crumbling. The strikes today, very, very, very satisfactory. I should never wish for harm for anyone. But the whole point with Kiev was that they should have been visited and taken out already in 2023, because they didn't take the warnings in 2022, 2023 as being real. That's one of the problem with the Ukraine PR, is that they started to believe their own con. And a lot of shit you're hearing from the Ukrainians right now is just like, why? Why would you do that? Why would you say that? Why would you insist on being this dumb fuck who's gonna get this shit kicked out? There was this discussion about the US, as I said, not agreeing to the installation, which I consider bullshit because, as I said, you need the targeting data and all that process screams USA. But the answer from Zelensky would have been a kabuki show and saying, we're sorry, we're sorry. No, the guy went like, no, we're not going to stop. And if you want us to stop, then provide us better weapons. So you have this chutzpah and this misplaced bravado, which in case of Ukraine and Russia is not helping with the whole principle of the Russians not going for what we actually want until TWK. And Snake said that multiple times. You have the Russians being a bit mellow, and then Ukrainians doing something so stupid and so groundbreaking that the Russians are forced to reply, and their reply causes the damage that they should be doing normally. So it's literally pulling the monkey out of Putin every single time. And at the same time, their PR show continues unabated. Like, we now have people like Romanov who are relaying that there's going to be a mobilization in Russia in May. Then Zelezhido said it's going to be in June. I mean, this is the good. The more the Ukrainians are going to this PR cycle and are being fed PR, the better it is, because usually they are very good and then they fumble it somewhere. We saw that with the Su-34s when they started to make nonsensical bullshit, like we have these radio beacons, there, nothing happened. Then they made up this attack. The first attack was a huge failure on Sevastopol port when they had damaged or destroyed 4 ships. Finally, we have the views, better views and better satellite images. There's a big zero. The course, probably, as I said, scarred from a failed missile attack. The 2 other guys probably also just grazed or shit like this. The 4th ship is not even touched. It hit way on the pier. Like, that was a big fail, in my opinion. And the fact they insisted so hard and so many days, and then it basically led to a mouse, was the first strike. Then we had the attack on Morozovsky, Yesk, and so on, which honestly, again, on satellite, absolute shit. By the way, this is the most beautiful thing. Andrew the pedo listed a damaged Beriev 200 from satellite pictures while there is no actual evidence for it. That's how fucking bad the whole PR op is. We're into a complete parallel universe that they were fucking force-fed into these people. And you have multiple more realistic Ukrainian pushers that are getting absolutely fed up with NAFO and NAFO-style propaganda. And Andrew the pedo is the epitome of that. But the most important part here is that we're going to a limit of warfare when one of the 2 parties has got to give something. There is no other way to deal with this. Either the Russians have miscalculated their offensive potential, and then we're gonna see them completely flounder post-June. Either the Ukrainians have miscalculated the defensive potential, and of course, whatever happens when it comes to the American aid, to what the Europeans can deliver and so on, is going to make them flounder. So basically, we might have a short, small push towards Konstantinovka, from south north, while the guys take over Chasov Yar. If Chasov Yar falls, then you're gonna have a fucking domino effect because that thing dominates Konstantinovka. But not only Konstantinovka, you're gonna also have a good view on Drushkovka. If you go towards Drushkovka, you're gonna fucking make the Ukrainians crazy because that means that you're going after Kramatorsk and Slovyansk. While of course you are closer by north, but now you also have an access from the south. As I said, you move towards Netailovka, you take Nova Mikhailovka, you advance towards Kurakovo, Ugledar is cut, and technically Ugledar is already cut, by the way, if you analyze it properly. So once all this shit is done and you push east to west 10, 20, 25 kilometers, then you're starting to have a huge problem, as I said, for the Ukrainian side. Because, okay, this happened. Okay, we killed a lot of Russians, we destroyed a lot of shit, but it still happened. And then the whole point of the Ukrainian defense is how many more can we stay in defense and have these guys come closer? Because as I said last time, you will have also to rethink the whole point. Kharkov fell because you had the time to sap the shit. And the Russians were, sorry to say it, but completely indigent when it came to support that axis because they were focused on a completely different operation. They lost track of it, let's say it like this, or chose to lose track, whatever. But here, Avdiivka doesn't change anything. They can push 20 kilometers from Donetsk and still be under Donetsk cover. Here you have a problem because the biggest urban center that you have to mount anything is Pokrovsk, and then the clusters up north, starting by Konstantinovka. But Konstantinovka is going to be under threat if Chasov Yar falls. So once again, we are going back to the basics of warfare. Some strategies are very nice when you can afford it, but sometimes affording one way is not affording both ways. And that's what I'm saying. Affording to be in defense and sparing people and equipment is not the same as making a successful counterattack given what places you have lost and how much the other guys have gone into the territory. And I had this idea that at some point, end of April, aid from America was going to be voted, and then the military machine was going to go. But then I rethought it completely again. On satellite, we are not seeing anything weird in Lima. We're not seeing anything weird in Aniston. So whatever can be sent to Ukraine under the new aid or whatever you want to call it will have to be from existing stocks. So the US is going to deplete itself to send shit in Ukraine. Depletion is a great word, I'm sorry. But if they want to send anything serious, they're still going to have to pull 300 Abrams, as I said, 400 Abrams, about 800 Bradleys. It's not the end of the world for sure, but you're still going to have to pull them out from active units. And for you guys who have probably read the thread of Colby, the idiot that has joined the Insider, the backlog for equipment is 3 to 4 years. Of course, nothing's going to happen to America in 3 to 4 years. But at the same time, you need to train the people you want to fight into that war. So that either you pull shit from storage, refurbish them, and give them to your troops meanwhile, either you simply are going to lose proficiency for certain units because you're going to start moving shit around and trying to have that training done in a way that it will not affect your fighting capacities too much. But let's not forget, a ABCT is little less than 200 Bradleys, and a little less than 100 Abrams. So if you send three full ABCTs in Ukraine, you'll have to find the shit to re-equip those three ABCTs that are going to give their equipment. Or you're going to have to find the time to refurbish those three ABCTs from existing stocks. And we had a discussion with a couple of apparently Abrams tankers, and one of them gave it right away. I think the tanks that the Ukrainians have had are 100% American, so there's no change in there. There's no DU armor missing. They literally underwent a small strip down from a level M1A1 AEM, from a level that is already 90-ish in capability. So basically, they got roughly Gulf War, first Gulf War type of tanks. And this, in my opinion, and as we had discussion with these guys, means that some National Guard got stripped of its unit, but then how many National Guard ABCTs are going to start stripping of their assets? And on top of it, as I said, again, the Americans have, but not only them actually, have shown a complete lack of foresight when it came to war type maintenance and sustainability for their assets. Something that a lot of people mocked Russia about initially is proving to be hard for everyone in this type of war. And on top of it, we had the admission right away with the Challenger 2. Okay, it's a special case because it's a fat tank, but they are too heavy for Ukrainian ground, for Eastern Europe, with whatever you want to know it, bridges, ground, roads. There is a huge problem, a tactical problem. There's a tactical and strategic mobility issue with these tanks, and that's fuel, that's maintenance, that's failures, that's French stability. So basically crossings, you need for most of them M80 bridges. There are rather few of them in Ukraine, and there is a fuck ton of rivers, streams, and shit which you need to ford or find a place to ford. So once again, the idea is not that Ukraine is not going to get its equipment, but what kind of equipment is going to get, when it's going to get it, and what is it going to do? Because so far, every single Western equipment sent there has not shined. From Abrams get taken out by FPVs and ATGMs, to Leopards getting taken out by Lancets, artillery, mines. There is nothing new about these tanks. There is nothing new about these assets. This shit works when there is this overarching air dominance from the USA or NATO, whatever you want to call it. And then they can roll because the planes have already fucking paved the way. But now, as I said, with non-contact tools that we have, the FPVs, and God forbid something else, you can have as much aviation as you want. It's still going to be complicated. In a sense, the Russians are paying that every single day. They can blow up 300 Ukrainians with MPKs, doesn't matter. They're going to lose 10 tanks. Because it's that complicated to do that kind of war. This was the bad part, by the way. And the ugly part is now the kind of losses that both of the sides are allowing to take. We are going to 20-30% of units per week on both sides. And the biggest problem is that the Russians have this visibility due to how the Ukrainians fight. And the Ukrainians, unfortunately, cannot hide their losses once they have to bury them. So on that, we see that the losses are exchanged. I'm not saying evenly, but they are exchanged. And on top of it, due to the fact that the Russians now are using the long distance hammer for every problem, and I'm saying every single one, like drop a new MPK on a pool of recruits, drop a new MPK on a UAV spot, drop a new MPK on a landing spot, drop an Iskander on S-300s, drop an Iskander on 30 plus howitzers in the middle of nowhere, drop this Iskander on a bunch of assets, a camp, whatever you want to call it. These losses now are more and more and more and more dangerous. Apparently, the description of the losses that we saw today, the two S-300Ls plus the ground control station, resulted in 20 killed. We're speaking 20 fucking air defense specialists. And at the other side, yes, they're gonna have like 12 guys killed on MTLB. It's very sad, awful. But just look at the balance. So this is where we're going right now. We're going to this wholesale murder of both sides, with one side having huge problems financially, demographically, militarily, and the other side turning a blind eye on the losses. So you can pretty much see where the savagery is going. And on top of it, the Russians are doing something that unfortunately should have done a bit earlier, which is going after power infrastructure. Don't forget, summer in most of Ukraine is pretty fucking warm. So there is no good time in Ukraine to actually lose electricity, lose power. There is not a good time in winter because you're gonna fucking freeze. There is not a good time in the summer because you're gonna fucking cook. And also, they're gonna go down this scale of damage, which is first TPP that they can take out without completely turning Ukraine into a black fucking hole. Then some substations are going to start isolating cities or regions when you see what they did with Nikolaev, but ultimately it failed. Let's be also honest. That city was a fucking basically terra nullius at some point. They were fucking lining up for water, for bread. They still don't have jobs. This kind of thing on a bigger scale is really going to turn Ukraine into a fucking black hole. And then we're gonna start asking the question: why is it for? Is it just to try and make the people flee? Is it just to put down the damaged foot and cause more destruction that would force whatever aid is given to Ukrainians to start being invested into this? This is one thing that I had always said 2022, 2023. The point is to make the Ukrainians spend money more into repairing critical shit instead of start paying soldiers. You need substations, you need to repair these TPPs, you need to repair lines in order to have this transfer energy from the west, whatever you want to take it. It is very fucking simple. We are going more and more towards this damage-based assessment when it doesn't matter if you lost 100 guys this day, 3 shitty assaults, the other side has lost a city or two or a village or two, and on top of it, the rear of the said fucking side has lost, I think was 1.8 gigawatt or something like that today with the Tripilka. It's just an order of magnitude right now. It has nothing to do with skill. It has nothing to do with how good you are at war, how bad you are at war. It's literally lobbing shit, destroying shit, and making it count. And also in the case of Russia, because this is one of the things that I laughed about, a lot of Ukrainians were complaining that they wanted to be able to hit Russia. But because the country was big, they needed long-range missiles. I said, like, well, maybe have a bigger country. What can I say? I mean, like, we are into a logic of not accepting the base discrepancy between Russia and Ukraine, not accepting to be the smaller guy. And this is such a post-truth, post-realistic world. I mean, I'm going to ask you guys, yes, I know that it's not always the case that when you're a short guy, you're going to get busy with a big guy and you're going to always lose. I'm not saying this. But it's more likely that the big guy buries you than the contrary. I think we will all be able to agree on that. Same thing with any kind of competition. If you are, I don't know, a mom's and pop store and you see Walmart or Tesco, whatever, come to your doorstep, I think the outcome is mostly obvious. Of course, you can always adapt to Tesco being there, Walmart being there, but you never be that Tesco. And if they want to fucking close you, they're gonna close you. So this is the whole point I'm having with Ukrainians right now, and that's what I want to tell you. The whole claims for Kuleba was now asking for 7 Patriots systems. They call them systems, so it's not exactly battery, but let's say it's 7 batteries. That's in the most extended case. That means 56 TELs, 7 Raiders, 7 MSQs, 7 to 14 battery slash accumulator slash whatever your power generation. It's a huge bunch actually. It's a good equipment, and it would be more than what, for instance, Greece has to protect itself. But at the same time, given what they are defending from, it will not make much sense, because the whole point of the Patriot system in Ukraine is that it's being used over the kind of capabilities for which these systems were based for. So basically, for the US is not gonna fucking have this imaginary line and let whoever it is strike them day after day for 2 years. Because in order to intercept everything that goes by, you're gonna fire these missiles. You don't even need the other side to destroy your Patriot systems. You're just gonna fire too many missiles. And we're gonna have the same process that we had for artillery at some point. You're just gonna empty, let's say you have this 56, yes, it's 56 stealth. If they're all pack twos, for instance, for missiles per tel, and you are looking at 200 as a minimum per salvo for each tel that you're gonna spend. Then you're gonna reload, so you need at least 400 plus missiles. This is 224 that you will need per two. You are looking at 450 missiles, 448. And let's say that over 2-3 weeks they just fucking shite the shit out of you, and they send everything that they can. And if you fire 2 interceptors every single time, that means that with 300 missiles, the Russians are gonna bingo whatever you have as AD without even having to destroy them. we had this discussion last year, and this was the whole fucking problem for Ukraine. And that's why the counter helped them a lot. The counter helped them because it pushed the Russian attention out of Kiev, out of Kharkov, out of all these cities, and focused the Russians to a very narrow band. Zaporozhye, Bakhmut, part of Donetsk Oblast with Vremensky Lech. This is why I think it makes no sense for Ukrainians to ask for more, because the only thing that more is going to do is just going to spend more faster. If you want a kind of comparison, it's like take a you go to whatever fast food there is next to you and you take a big, I'd say, cup of whatever drink. First you put in there one straw, and then if you want to know what Ukrainians want to do, then put 3 more straws in there. And then drink from it. You're just going to drink it faster. Your only chance to have the same amount that with 1 straw instead of 4 straws and have the same sustainability is to have 4 other cups. I know it's very stupid, but just try it. It's the same cup, but with 4 straws you get 3 more fluxes than with 1 straw. And then you're just bleeding. Instead of the 2 or 3 systems that have now, they're going to have 7. Okay, 1 is completely lost, another is crippled. So you're going to just fire 6 times more missiles. That's what it is. There's nothing else there to be said. The AD situation, unfortunately, has only one answer, and that is exactly what happened to the Russians with the HIMARS, which is to try and push the ground offensive farther enough so those guys are not going to be able to bomb the shit out of you. But when it comes to Russia, given its capabilities, given what it throws at you, then it's true that for Ukrainians there is less to be done. They will just have to have more AD and hope for the best. But at the same time, putting more AD around Kiev or around bigger cities, as I said, is going to force you to either pull AD from the front lines or near the front lines, or allow a huge part of your front lines to be naked, which is unfortunately what's happening more or less right now. When there is no answer for the UMPKs, there is no answer for Zala and Orlan overflight, and they're supposed to have so many of these fucking assets. They're supposed to be Supercat Astrams. They're supposed to be having vampires. They're supposed to have new OSA missiles, Estrela missiles, Crotals, all this. Where is all this stuff? Because we don't see Crotals destroyed, guys. They are supposed to have like at least 30 more OSAs. Where are these? And I know that the problem is not where the OSAs are. The problem is where the missiles for the OSAs are. We see a couple of Strelas here and there. One thing that is not visible anymore is the iris. Irises have disappeared. Russians are not finding them. And trust me, they're trying. We had Nassams a couple of weeks back. That's the reality of this war right now, is that when it comes to the war up there, the Ukrainians will have to literally have more systems than bigger European countries, like more systems than Germany, more systems than France. And there was this claim about there are 100 in Europe right now. No, it's not true, because 2 or 3 Germans were sent there, and at least 1.5 were lost. Greece will never give us these systems. It's a non-starter. The whole point of Greece is they don't want to give the S-300 because they're using it for a different role than the Patriots. Once again, I keep saying that we have a huge problem of vision with the Ukrainians. They are still trying to beat the reality. They're trying to beat what exists. They're trying to go beyond the physical. And this is not how you manage a war. It's not how you manage a state. This is not how you manage anything. This is how you calm people through belief, through unsupported, unsubstantiated belief. And I know I'm not going to start hitting on religion with these guys, not at all. But I'm saying that you are not going to get satiated without eating. You need that food. You need stuff that exists. You can train your body to, go on for longer without it, but at some point you'll need to drink, you'll need to eat. At some point you need to be real. And Ukraine right now are completely in a different universe. And unfortunately, this is mostly supported by the fact they are doing damage on the battlefield. Taking damage as well, but they are doing damage. And you can hear that, like, this is no time to start telling the truth. This is time to, mobilize. I'm like, yeah, no problem. Just let's hide that we lost 100 guys from a shitty bomb because we killed another guys on the other side. This is one of the things that has been systematically going on with Ukraine, which is shielding themselves from what doesn't fit, what doesn't suit their reality. And when they cannot avoid it, they again make it a weapon, which is, oh my God, we need more AD because they are doing this, and that. But then you are having this very funny moments when today they announced that I had shot like 85% of the missiles. And you're like, but if you are shooting 85% of these missiles, with what are you shooting them? I would like to know, guys, for real. With what are you shooting 85% of whatever is there? Gerans, Key 101, Key 55, whatever. And this is what I said, that we are into this world of lies. And I would invite you guys to check, since the beginning of this year until now, how many cruise missiles they've downed. And ask yourself, how many missiles have been fired just to do that? The Russians do the same, by the way. Sometimes they are with these ridiculous claims about 20, 25 Storm Shadows. I'm like, there are not enough fucking planes to fly it this much. They would need the whole Su-24s to fly at once, which is an extremely risky operation. They have done it, by the way. The Ukrainians have been stupid enough to fly at least 6 of them at the same time. But, it's something else. It's literally the outlier which proves the point. So, I don't know what the Ukrainian expectations are. One of the biggest problems I have with Ukrainian expectations are like, is this one of those moments when you have this guy who is faking it, and then at one point he's faking it so well, but things are catching up with him, and he's still pretending to maintain this composure. At some point, everything goes down at once. Are we going to that fucking point with the Ukraine of now? If so, I think it's probably the worst thing that could happen to that country. because you don't want these hard crash landings. I'm not saying it's the case. I'm saying, are we going through there when at some point you announce all this shit and all these victories, all this stuff? You look at the map, you're not advancing, you're pulling back. You look at what you announced for air defense, and then you see your fucking power plants burning and guys hitting in the middle of Odessa, a train pinpointing it just to prove that you are full of shit. And then you're asking 500,000 of guys to mobilize soon, and at the same time you promise to demobilize a couple of your soldiers, but you said, nah, you know what, not yet, maybe in 8 months. So you're going to this cycle when you just cannot fucking believe what's going on. And then you're asking yourself, is it a case of this guy faking it until he can make it? But he's not gonna make it. And then it's gonna be a fucking talented Mr. Ripley drama kind of shit. So yeah, guys, this is my scare right now. That in fact, it's not as much that Russia is gonna win. It's just Ukraine is gonna crash, and not soon, but soon enough for this kind of war. Now, on a more tactical discussion, if you guys read the Institute of Study of War, yeah, I know the um, the latest coverages have been absolutely. I think they're down to having their shit written by AI or something like that, because no human can vomit that much nonsense or that many contradictions at the same time. They are insisting on the fact that Russia is not making progress. We're losing too much equipment. There is no capability to conduct large operations. And I'm like, is that so? Because what I'm looking at when I look at the map is that multiple points of advance, every single day there is an assault. Positive, negative, that's something else. We're not discussing it. But measure the assaults from where to where they're going, and there's a fucking line of about 116 kilometers. Some points in between the line are quiet. For instance, around the Gorlovka, nothing is happening except some shelling and stuff like that. Then you get areas like in Kherson where the whole adventure in Krinky has definitely died down. Not as much because the Russians have recovered the ground, but simply the Ukrainians are getting exhausted, and what they're doing right now is just harassment from the other bank. But seeing the Institute of Wars going to this absolutely mindless drivel, whereas before they would, at least open the yap to say something. This doesn't matter if it was wrong. We all remember there are no reserves in the middle of fucking September, and 3 weeks after they start the biggest assault operation of 2023 when it comes to troops involved and equipment involved. I'm like, holy shit. These guys are going down, and generally you can feel it. They're gonna be always the gore posters, the stupid assholes who are gonna post combat footage, but we're not gonna start analyzing what's going on. Then you gotta have the retards like Deep State, who insisted in October that Avdiivka was fine. Then January came, and they said, "Oh, Even if they take the city, they cannot exploit it. Now we are fucking at 4 kilometers from Karlivka. And I need to tell you guys, it's fucking surprising. I thought that I was the first to say that, by the way, that after the fall of Avdiivka, I would expect them to go up north towards Ocheretino, but they decided to go, for obvious reasons, towards Karlivka to open there. And they are, they are. I know the losses are there, everything's true, but they're in advance to my opinion. Of course, what's missing is the upper part north in Ocheretino, which skews a little bit the analysis, but the reality is there. And on top of it, there is the advance, Mikhailovka, they're going to go to Korakov, and so on and so forth and so forth. So tactically, the Russians are being opportunistic, of course, with losses, of course, with a type of practices at the assault that not everybody's going to be able to stomach. And once again, I agree with that. But let's not forget what's going on here. We're into the 7th month of, actually even more. We're entering the 8th month of the October Russian offensive, and it's not stopping. It's not. Like, what the actual fuck? Even if you want to compare with the start of the war, 2022, you had this about a month and a half of full assault all over Ukraine. A first stop mid to late March, then transfer of troops in Donbass from end of April until July, with the liberation of the Lugansk Oblast and the advances in a couple of areas around Zaporozhye. And then you had the first counter in August in Kherson, second counter in Kharkov, and it was done. Then the whole shit restarted early 2023, lasted again maybe 3 months. Then Russians went into stasis roughly around April, with only Bakhmut being really pushed and some stupidity around Ugledar. And finally, you got the counter for 4 months from the Ukrainian side. And then we were into October 2023. And it's the longest period of full assault. Of course, the front lines are shorter. But this is one thing I want to say, everybody. Just fucking remember. It's going to be like this for a while. And I'm saying that I don't see the Russians stopping before June. And if they stop in June, they would stop not that much because they are wasted or spent, but because they're going to, in my opinion, look where they are and say, okay, we are far enough. Whatever the Ukrainians are going to do now, they will have to commit at least as much as us. But even half of that, losses-wise, is going to break the Ukrainians. So if you want to just look at the numbers, Zaporozhye counteroffensive plus whatever they liberated, freed maybe 380 square kilometers in 4 months with huge losses. Now, the Russian offensive, piece it up as you may, since October, has allowed them to occupy or liberate, call it as you wish, at least 500 square kilometers. And of course, part of it is on the gray zone. They just advanced on the gray zone. But part of it is really pushed the Ukrainians out of there. So just rethink of it. This operation that started around Avdiivka and beyond has now freed 40% more territory than the Ukrainian counter. It's not stopping. So if the Ukrainians want to recover that ground they've lost, they're gonna have to basically submit to the loss machine. And then the question is, do they have the assets? Do they have the people to lose into this war? And to a certain point, then you would come to me and say, yeah, but see, they're mobilizing, so they're gonna have the assets. And I'm like, no problem then. Let them do it. And in my opinion, the whole Ukrainians are preparing for 2025 in order to be able to counter. I'm like, I would love to, but I don't see with what. And I'm telling you guys, I have no problem admitting if I'm wrong, but I don't see with what. They're gonna send whatever they have, then what? I said to you guys, even if they lose only half to what the Russians have lost numerically right now, they would lose as much as they lost at the counter. And we all know why they stopped the counter as they started it. Because the first few battles cost them way too many equipment to be able to sustain that tempo for much longer. And I do not see how the Ukrainians can do any better than that. So that was it for me, guys. If you have interventions, questions, whatever, I didn't touch much of anything else, please be my guest. Go on, next story. I was checking someone.
But the mobilization numbers, I mean, I actually don't take those numbers at face value because I mean they were, I tracked them like early in the war and they turned out to be total bullshit. So since early 2023, I just completely discarded them. I mean, it's an interesting data point, but obviously, like there can be any number of intervening factors because if they really had recruited, 1.03 million or something, that is this together with the force they started, they'd be sitting at like 2.25, 1.15 or 1.25 or 1.3 million men under arms. I mean, that just seems absurd to me. And even if you take off 500,000 casualties, I mean, not all of those are going to be irrevocable. So you could be really just looking at a net reduction of like 300,000. I mean, you still have a 1,000,000-man army. It's a bit absurd. I did the thing that I've been sort of, this is my mental benchmark that I've been returning to time and again with regards to losses is like that the life expectancy data that they gave as an aggregate, like population estimate. I had somebody work back from that, and I presented the problem on Twitter. I got various estimates, but basically, like you can have an average around like depending on your starting assumptions, you either get between like 150,000 to 250,000 surplus deaths among the military age male population. That's like about 100,000 a year, or between 75 and 130,000 a year is the range of estimates I got. That seems to be a pretty reasonable like starting point. Basically, it just depends what your starting assumptions are, and from that, I mean, then you can begin to work backwards from that and understand like why then are you hearing reports where like new brigades and battalions are being sent to the front at 50, 30% authorized strength. I mean, it's just like, and then the difficulty they have with forming new brigades as well, and all these reports of new brigades being downgraded or downsized. I mean, it's not. It doesn't really paint a picture of this. I mean, really, in order to have like recruit over 1 million people, they would have to have had a really like well-oiled, functioning mobilization system, which, by all accounts and by anecdotally as well as like from numbers I have, like they just don't fucking have it. As well, in addition, I mean, the other thing to consider is that um, within the last 6 months or something, another like almost 500,000 military, well, essentially military-aged men like fled Ukraine. So all this is just like it doesn't paint a picture of state competence.
Well, let's be honest with that. I was more or less the same opinion as you until we started looking around with everybody. I mean, you were in the group as well. So my biggest problem is that the only way to make sense of all of this is that these guys are fucking lying, and that of course they haven't get the quotas for that. And then I said also something else that was part of this article. I said there's this woman that says, okay, we are supposed to have 800,000 people under the flag, but only 300 at the front, where the other 500,000. And if we just surmise these are losses, and as you said, not every loss is going to be recoverable, probably half of it, let's say 300,000 even, recoverables, fine, you know? But the only way to make sense of it is the following, is that most of these guys just sit around, do shit until they're called to get killed or wounded or whatever. This, to be honest, for you and me and for everyone else, listening to this in a state of war makes no sense. But I have another problem right now, which is, um, let's say that the numbers advanced are inflated. Well, when it comes to what he said in combat roles, because that's the thing, and Trapped Iron said it, the combat roles, you have 21,000 out of 33,000, which is basically two-thirds. If you grab two-thirds as fighters out of this million or something, then indeed you're going to be at 660,000 that were mobilized to fight. And then it is a lot more, I'd say, believable when it comes to what I thought, which was mostly they should be at around 600,000, and war, attrition, PTSDs, whatever you want, have shrunk that number to the current 400 something, 480,000. I don't know how much was announced by the retards in charge. But so basically, if you just take it at face value of 33,000, 3%, and all mobilized are soldiers, it's true that to me it makes no sense. And I said it as well, where are the dead, where are the people that should be at least wounded. Okay, we know there is a large sector of these guys that are amputated. 59,000 are supposed to be military amputees. 50,000 were announced publicly by those leaflets that Suro showed, but I'm probably going to find them again. So generally, we can see where some irrevocables are going to go. But yet then the 1.1 million, where the fuck are these people? And everybody's asking the same question. To me, the only thing that could make sense is that part of these guys are logisticians, or they're taken up in order to make the fucking machine run, and only two-thirds of those that are picked up are going to basically fight and get killed. And that could explain in one sense. But the most important part is that, okay, why would you need 300,000 people for management and logistics? And on that point, I start to understand why. You do not have a general logistical structure. Your bigger logistical hubs are literally civilian hubs that you're using Nova Posta, ATB, Epicenter, Metro, whatever. And you need to atomize these units because you are not transporting most of that shit by trucks. You literally are going pickup by pickup. However, while this was evidently true the first year, because we all remember the shitty state of the last mile deliveries and detailing, where I'm very concerned, let's be honest now, extremely concerned, is that if you are employing this fuck ton of people to just, give food, make the inner transportation, wouldn't it be easier to just have the civilian society do it for you? Because on top of that, as you know, you have a fuck ton of volunteers and civilians doing just the same. So, in a sense, I mean, the whole paradigm work with all these guys making the transport shit and then managing the logistical chain. Plus, let's not forget, you're gonna see when the TCK guys, the military commissar guys, roam around the city. They're not alone. They're not one or two. You got 5, 6, 10 of these goons. So, this inflation generally might well be plausible by having a completely different structure that we would expect. So basically, let's say that you have 200,000 at the front. You know that you would need at least 4 persons to handle those 200,000. From the guy from the base storage to the detailing storage to the dumps and to the front line, all these fucking layers for one soldier to have his stuff. It's completely logical. However, with Ukraine, this cannot, work that way. This is my opinion, by the way. I'm not saying this is the truth. It cannot work that way because most of the time, big storages get checked and get destroyed. We had that very early in 2022 with the storage in Odessa and another storage in Nikolaev, where they had barely put ammunition, and then I think everybody remembers it looked like a fucking nuclear strike. And then they tried to make it look like it was a substation going blow, and there was no real ammunition there. They got the guys to go around and check it. Anyway, it's not very important what happened, but basically, when they have large units, they get spotted because, of course, you get an accumulation of shit. I would also like to point out that it still remains a puzzle for us at Timor Criminal, because I think that, in a sense, it should be possible, because if the mobilization is not that deep, then they shouldn't have the problems they have right now. In the sense that, okay, let's say you have only 500,000 mobilized, right? You should be able to replicate those 500,000, even with a bit of violence. But the biggest problem we're seeing on the Ukrainian side is that people want to get demobbed. People want to be done with the war if they survive 2 years and plus. And you suddenly don't want that. You want to keep whatever you have as an army, add, I don't know, 200, 300, 400, 500,000 more, and you have no structure for that. The only way it would work is that you create an extra structure of 150,000 people to manage those 500,000 on their supplies, their health, their management, simply as, getting people checked at hospitals, at your local military office and stuff like that. So all this shit, costs people, adds to the fucking strain. And I completely agree with you. At first sight, it's very complicated to make sense of it. But once you drop it down to how bureaucratic the military of Ukraine, of Russia as well, is, then you start understanding that maybe it's not completely out of loop. Because then you would have a honestly, if your irrecoverables are the way I think and the way Trump thinks and Addicted pointed out are 200,000 people, that means that for real you've lost 400,000 in a way or another. Wounded, killed, missing in action, prisoners of war, deserters, and so on. And if the numbers are true, only 21,000 are in combat roles, then is it possible to have 50,000 deserters in Ukraine? You know what I mean? Like this is one of the problems that I have with the calculus we made. But at the same time, I do not see how else would you have that much of a problem if you are not that deep into the mobilization game. And I think that one of the references, remember that you made about a Chinese historical battle when the mobilization went beyond control. But I think the Ukrainians have just that. They went too far, and it is not delivering what's supposed to be delivering. It's just delivering meat instead of a cohesive force. I don't know what to think about that.
I mean, the other thing too that is also a data point that's been mentioned by defense think tankers in the West is that because of the phenomenon of mass fabbing now, like because these things are dropping, 10, 20, 30 kilometers behind the line, like they're taking out specialists. So there is a drain of specialists as well. And this is actually some of the context with which the West is kind of panicking, talking about sending troops because they need like more people to actually man the technical systems like the SAM sites and stuff like that. Like these are things that are just not easily replaced. Like where are you going to train more SAM operators in Ukraine, right? So
Yeah, completely, man, completely. Just a moment. Okay, guys, I had a small issue here. As usual, Elon tries to stop me from spacing, but we're back at it. I don't know if you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, because at some point I lost hearing of every one of you guys. So yeah, Ali, it's up to you. And as for Snake, I completely agree with you, man. The it, it's difficult to make sense of it, but at the same time, the numbers, which is also a bit suspicious, the numbers are more or less coalescing around the 3%, except for Kiev, but that's something else. So is it like a mean to wag the dog and say that we are doing our job in order to protect themselves vis-a-vis Zelensky? Possible? Is it the reality? Then, oh my God, they're in way deeper shit that we thought. And then you have the worst part of all this, which is somewhere in between that, as I said, they are both not telling the truth about mobilization, but at the same time, the mobilization is being shown to be, incomplete, let's say it like this, because the losses are not being replaced. So in any case, it's a maelstrom of bullshit. And based on the numbers that we have from them, we are thinking this. But at the same time, as I said, it's very complicated to completely make sense of it, given that they should have enough troops to, at least weather whatever is happening now at the front. But generally speaking, as I said, I'm ready to believe that they're inflating their numbers just not to be, seen as bullshitting Zelensky. but it just makes it worse, in my opinion. Honestly, it just makes it worse. So I'm taking whatever that is, and to me, we arrive at the same positions. Like even they lie, okay, they still have the capability to grab people from the street, fine. But given how fucked up this process is right now, it's just gonna go worse and worse, in my opinion. So yeah, guys, yeah, Lee, please.
Yeah, hello. I wanted to ask you, you saw the behemoth of electronic warfare on the T-72B3, the other one, which they added like a multi-spectrum jamming equipment. Do you have any information if it worked at all or how
You you,
solutions could be?
you mean the Mad Max 72?
Not the one with the tortoise, like yeah, the one with that like had a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah, yeah.
EU boxes.
I know that one exactly. I think the same thing. Basically, according to Ukrainian sources, it took 19 drones to take it out. And the picture that Sternenko posted about that situation was that it was a auto-guided drone that hit the electronic warfare system. So when it came to manned drones, apparently dropped most of them. What surprised me and what disappointed me a lot is that apparently the Russians who were manning the tank got scared once they got hit, and they just left it the way it is, because we saw that Azov just got by, jumped in the tank, and then moved the tank out of reach. But what was described was that they put two main standard frequencies jammers, two blunters, and then they had a smaller unit for every non-standard antenna, and they had a kind of dephaser, which was that basically it would go from one frequency to another in order to always be covered against drones. And apparently, given the description by Sergei Flash, is that for between 700 and 1,000 meters, there was an immediate frequency jamming, or at least frequency shredding when you got closer to the tank. And that's why apparently they had to use a auto tracked FPV, which basically didn't care if you lost contact visually, the drone would go straight at it. What is ironical is that the supposed auto-tracked FPV still hit too high. It hit uh, between the canopy, so basically the cope cage, and the system, because the system wasn't completely fucked up for a while, and also it didn't affect the generator that I had installed next to the side turret area, which made it extremely ironical, because apparently the tank had been ongoing for a while until they ran out of fuel, and then they were able to both approach it with a drone and then went and then got it from position during the night. But once again, it just proves that at least as a solution, it's doable, but it's one takes place. It's heavy, and you would need a alternative power source, because you cannot make it run via the power system of the tank. In a sense, we already knew this, because this kind of electronic warfare was already being spoken about roughly around mid 2023, when Bobber started to literally rampage the advancing Ukrainian troops. But it's just the same. You just need, as I said, it could stay on a huge, elongation behind a T80 turret or a T72 turret, and you would need to have this pyramid on top of your cope cage. But generally speaking, to my opinion, it was a very positive development, because that meant that, contrary to what people are saying, Russians are taking electronic warfare seriously. It's just that it's the beginning for everyone. I know people are going to say, how is it the beginning? We are close to 1 year and a half since the first FPV. It's true, but once again, may I recall everyone that the first few FPVs that would hit tanks frontally would be absolute misses. We had multiple footages like that when having a visor or a cope cage would force the FPVs to hit on the upper front hull and basically do almost no damage. And then they just adapted. Instead of attacking like that, they started to hit the fuel lines, to hit the engines, and so on. This is the whole point of the FPV situation. It's a very versatile, flexible system. It has flaws, it has limitations. But overall, it still allows, given how cheap and how plentiful it is, to basically use it for anything. You want to kill a guy, you're going to kill a guy. You want to try and attack a armored system, you're going to attack an armored system. And sometimes if you are stupid, and that's some things that were said initially, that okay, you're going to change frequencies, but it is easier for everybody to, have a multi-frequency with the classical ones. And that's what happened for a while. Ukrainian strikes started to die down, and then they just changed to other frequencies or non-standard frequencies. So in order to, parry all this stuff, you need something like what I was on the Mad Max 72. However, how can I say this? My opinion is that this system would be better served not into a tank, because it adds stress to the turret articulation and turret wing, but maybe into mules. Like you have one of these groups and you have a MTLB just fucking filled to the brim with EW, and you have one each 2 or 3 vehicles, and that would make it almost impossible to come by. But once again, the problem with FPVs is that they are, I'd say, one of the most visible threat, but the biggest issue still remains how to deal with all the threats at the same time. So you're gonna get FPVs, artillery, drones that drop actually explosives, Lancet type drones now, because Ukrainians apparently are starting to use them in more numerous ways. Mines, EEDs, ATGMs. The biggest problem with this war is that the tank is not in a position like the Americans were at the Gulf War, when aviation and close air support were making absolutely mincemeat on the other side. Here, the fronts are smaller, actions are smaller, and both sides have, at least tactically, the same kind of view and vision on the battlefield. On top of it, one of the sides is not completely isolated. So Ukraine has 4 countries that still have open borders with it, and basically transfer funds, equipment, and supplies for this war. Then you have the ISR coming from the US, although that's not always now a back-breaking deal, as we saw with the latest 2 attacks on Russian soil. The biggest problem with this war is that it's such a very specific war that literally the last such war was Vietnam, to be honest. And it doesn't bode well for Ukraine as a, I'd say, a logic, because most of the Ukrainian allies and most of the equipment that's going to go into Ukraine is coming from way further than the equipment that the Russians are producing, manufacturing, stocking, and employing. And on top of it, we got most of the same team, China and Russia. Okay, China in different capability, but still there. And Ukraine is a bit the South Vietnam in this case. Of course, it's not exactly the same type of war, but we are arriving at a situation when there is a huge superiority, and the fight is not like a kind of complicated guerrilla style. It's pretty straightforward in smaller fronts, and this is the problem that we're seeing in this war, is that you cannot compare it to whatever else. I do not think, for instance, sorry to digress. I do not think that you're going to see the same type of war in the Pacific. I do not think that, for instance, a Operation Korea or in Taiwan is going to look like this.
Yes, definitely, I get you. But like, as an counter solutions to FPV, I don't know if you saw there's a system that the Israelis actually did put on the Merkava at the beginning of the war on Gaza, and then they actually blurred the image. A few days ago, Elbit Systems published the photo. It's called the Hunter Eye. It's like description as an a 50 cal put on the main cannon of the tank with like multiple cameras, on all directions, and it's automated to hunt down FPVs, drones, whatever they are. And they actually they didn't say it can intercept off attack missiles, but in the video you see like a guy with a javelin, so they're hinting at it. So also that might be another another idea.
Sure, but don't forget something. Israeli tempo, when it comes to FPVs, artillery, and so on, is completely uncomparable with what's going on in Ukraine. If you want a comparison, it's like try to put those Israeli systems on the Ukrainian side, whereas both sides are lobbying. Okay, maybe not that much anymore on Ukrainian side, but you're gonna be shrapnel to fucking death. So every external system. This is one of the things that I'm not understanding with most of Western armament developers right now. They are still keeping this idea of externalizing everything and putting it as a superstructure instead of trying to integrate it within armor or find a way not for it not to be exposed. But you're gonna get shrapnel at least a couple of times, even if you're heavily armored. You're gonna get at ATGM to death. Most of the time, you're gonna have at least 3 to 4 FPVs. The problem with the intensity of the conflict in Ukraine is that it's still a low intensity conflict when it comes to the whole extent of the Ukrainian territory, but it's a high intensity on very localized points. So Avdiivka is like it's the closest you're gonna get to World War II assaults. The initial Russian pushes in Nikolaev just the same. Israel doesn't have that. Israel has a fucking glorified police action when they can use whatever weapon they want without prejudice. If they want to drop a 1-ton bomb into your building, they're gonna do it. There is no AD to stop them from doing that. The problem, once again, as I said, the problem with the FPVs in Ukraine is that the other side has enough AD deterrence not to have helicopters fly just on top of you and waste the shit out of the Ukrainian forces. So the problem with thinking about FPVs the way the Israelis are doing will not fit that well, in my opinion, with the Russian needs or Ukrainian needs in this case. It's just the same that look at what the Americans were so funny to market. They marketed their Vampire, which is basically APKWS add-on guidance head on a old Hydra FFR rocket. That system is cheap, accordingly, 25,000 only for the head, plus the rockets, plus the Westcam gimbal system to guide the missile, because it's laser guide. It's basically like a smaller ATGM for the sky. But it's being used for something that honestly has no purpose for Ukraine, because they have like 10 of these systems trying to hunt Shahids, which fly over 200 kilometers in bandwidth. So you will need to be at the right time at the right moment, but it's completely useless when you see how the Russians are using them. The same thing is going to happen, in my opinion, with the Russians trying to have all these multi-cameras and have like a scatter gun or whatever you want to do that. We had one guy, a very sad video of one Russian guy who managed to shoot down an FPV. FPV still went up and blow up next to a friend of his that was wounded next to a tree. So the biggest problem I have with any kind of kinetic suppressor, like pellets, shotgun pellets, active protection system, and so on, is that I have this feeling that at some point it's just going to backfire. That it's just going to be too much for what actually is needed with these systems. And what I still continue to say is that everything that the Russians need to stop at least a wave of, let's say, 10 FPVs per vehicle, they have it. They have they had the Doge system for ages. The Ukrainians had the Zaslon. It's not that complex. You can just put 2 warheads per side, and you have 8 warheads. 2 warheads for the top of the turret. You got 10 warheads. Given the way they work, you're gonna protect a side 3 to 4 times. So all these little things are already there. The decision not to equip tanks with those and letting the troops just go with EW or cope cages and all that stuff is because it's super cheap. Even electronic warfare, is gonna cost you what, $1,000 to make a whole baseline 50-meter wide system. The Mad Max T-72 that was bunched up with electronic warfare is also rather cheap for saving the vehicle. And then if you want to move to APS, it's still gonna cost you $50,000 according to KBP to install a Arena APS, and on top of it, you will have to find a way to power the shitty APS because, of course, most of the tanks, and it's the same thing for the Western tanks, are underpowered. So once again, that's what I wanted to go back to the thing. What's happening right now with the electronic warfare tests that the Russians are doing, and also a bit the Ukrainians, mostly Russians, is that they are going for the cheapest way and the most obvious way, the thing that they can do right away. Why? Because if you want to have an arena, you have to pull the tank out. You have to pull the tank, start reinstalling that shit. For the readiness state of the unit, it's just impossible. Okay, you can think of trying to install that, I don't know, in Donetsk and not waste time. But then you put the whole fucking system at risk, your technicians are at risk, and so on and so on. So the bigger problem of this war is just it brought back the industrial scale, and the FPV is, the most basic denominator of that thing, that big powers are going to wage industrial scale warfare, is that you have like 60,000, 80,000, 100,000, 150,000 FPVs flying left and right from both sides. Artillery is fine, like, okay, you can sense that industrial scale with artillery, but FPVs that are, popping out left and right, it's also something to tell you that Israel, being faced with even 10,000 FPVs with the forces that it engaged in Gaza, would probably have a completely different story when it comes to electronic warfare, when it comes to also SOPs for your troops. I think that you saw the latest video where these guys are going through an ambush path, and not a single Israeli soldier is covering left, right, or up and down. I do not think, I'm going to repeat, that's the greatest advantage that, in a sense, the Iranians have when it comes to who they are studying. I do not think that the way the Israelis are waging warfare, I do not say that the system, the anti-FPV system, will not work. I'm just saying that I do not think it will have the impact that we think it would have. Just look at the trophy systems. For a huge bunch of the tanks that are being employed currently, the trophy system is obturated. They do not use it because they had bad experiences among their own troops that would fucking walk by. The trophy would start and stop a rocket and would fucking pepper the whole soldiers around it. And that shit, we've seen multiple times, goes as far as 20 meters. So it will completely blast the whole way, a whole road, if you got people around it. So I would once again caution against over fetishizing technology and technology demonstrators, because the Russians were doing just the same. I mean, everybody remembers how the Volno-Res was presented initially. Now everybody knows that it's very useful for some frequencies, but for most of them, it's not going to work. There are gaps in protection up to a certain point directly on top of it. And of course, it's the first few examples that were sold, on top of being pricey, were of dubious general quality, and they would stand the test of time, but not that long. So basically, you would spend, I don't know, $3,000-4,000 for a system that would stand you up after 3 months. Like, once again, this is the biggest problem I'm having right here to convey, is that yes, probably that system is fine under the conditions that Israeli tested it, but move that system in the Ukraine contest, and then you're going to have a completely different, I'd say, result. And if you want the best, example is Abrams before coming to Ukraine. Of course, it had been a bit humiliated in Yemen and in Iraq, but in Ukraine they kept it off rather for so long. And the first couple of engagements it had, every time the tank was lost. So I would just want to convey that technical solutions already exist within the Russians. There is a cost, there is a feasibility logic, but most importantly, there is also this logic that you're going to take losses if you go into assaults. If it's not the FPVs, it's going to be the mines. If it's not the mines, it's going to be artillery. If it's not the artillery, it's going to be ATGMs. And if it works, then it works. But see, that's the truth. It worked, You don't need all these systems. That's how these people are thinking right now. And also, you have the cost factor. The point is to have the better result possible, the cheapest way. And I think for some of these actions, that's a criminal thought. I'm sorry to say it as it is. I wouldn't consider $50,000 worth of Arena M installed into a tank as expensive. Quite the contrary, honestly. Because once you think it properly, you're already putting more than $40,000 worth of ammunition in the tank. Your tank rounds are costing between $800 and $1,000 to make at the current rate for the Russians. So, this is the one of the biggest problems that I have with the way how sometimes the Russians are thinking, the Russian military is thinking, but it's just the same for Ukrainians. And yeah, I understand what a lot of people are saying when it comes to better preparation, better planning, better defenses. But I do not think that we are understanding what both sides are experiencing when it comes to cost, feasibility, prerogatives and priorities when it comes to fighting this war. Because I said this multiple times, I do not think the Russians are loving to send their tanks getting destroyed and their people getting killed. Right now, I think whatever they're making as calculus, they're thinking there's no better way than what they're doing right here. And I would tend to believe that, not because there is no better way, but under the pressure, the circumstances they have, they are doing as good as possible. And if you want things to change, honestly, deprive Ukraine for 1 month of US ISR. You're going to see the difference as night and day. I'm not speaking localized ISR because they have their shitty drones, but I'm saying long-term planning. Because one of the things the Ukrainians know that we cannot see, but they can see, is the movements via Russian highways and railroads. And this is something that's afforded to them by the US, who also does the analysis. Okay, listen, you have a whole echelon coming through, and that's how the Ukrainians are always, quote unquote, ready on the right direction to know where things are going and where they're coming from. So I would just once again caution against a single solution for a multi-form problem like FPVs. Sorry if it was a bit long. Up to you guys.
No, it's okay. Thank you, brother. Take that answer.
No, it's okay. If you want to intervene, guys, please. Okay, guys, thank you very much for being here. Once again, it was a bit wishy-washy the space today, because I just wanted to put out what we thought about mobilization, the potential capabilities that Ukrainians have. On the tactical aspect, I think something going to happen on Sunday. I'm going to have a better map space on Sunday regarding how things are going and where they're going to go. But one of the things that Russians have seemed to have abandoned for the moment is trying and push Ocheretino straight up. They are really trying to expand as possible westwards. Berdish is almost taken. There was a push next to it. Semenovka is taken. So the line there, once the line is folded, Ukrainians that are north of that line are going to have to pull back, therefore opening a gap under Ocheretino. And that's, in my opinion, still smarter than just trying to cut through by going along the railroad, because that's literally funneling yourself to get killed. But on Sunday we'll have a review of that option and see how the positional warfare is going to work there. In a sense, the current option, when you look at the topographic map, is a far more accurate than trying to go through Ocheretino and then behind Berezivka, mostly due to the fact that the Ukrainians resisted rather well for over 4 weeks on that area. Therefore, the momentum that Russians had directly after Avdiivka was smudged a little bit. But as you can see, you cannot hold the monkey down forever. So on that aspect, they just found out a different way to do it. And that allows also something that we weren't expecting, which was a bigger progress in Novomikhailovka and down from Novomikhailovka. So yeah, it's always like in nature, you don't have nothing for nothing. You don't have anything extra. Everything is transforming. And what you give up north, you are going to get down south. So yeah, see you guys on Sunday. Have a nice day. Bye-bye.